Hey Madeline, how's the day treating you?
Hey, so far so good. It's a lovely Tuesday kicking off April. I can't believe it's April already, but other than that, doing great. How about you?
I'm doing really well. I'm actually up in Baltimore today, a little bit of change of scenery. Over the weekend, I traveled up to DC and like did the cherry blossoms and all the like regional things that you can kind of do in the Mid-Atlantic. So is a really good day and glad to have the opportunity to kind of talk with you today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you to people that have joined us today. This is week 4 of our 6-part virtual workshop. And today we are going to jump in and talk a little bit more about setting your team up for success and setting up processes for decision making. If you're joining us for the first time, we do these live on Tuesdays at noon. We also have the recordings available for you to watch later. So we invite any questions if you're watching in real time, or if you think of any other questions, you're welcome to email those to us so that we can answer them on our next conversation. Speaking of that, Dorian, we did get some feedback that people that have tuned in have been very interested about your experiences with 7-Eleven and some of the foundation that gives you the ideas that you have. So, speaking about guiding decision making and empowering your team, what is there an example of what made you able to go see these cherry blossoms
Yeah.
over the weekend or
No, I appreciate that. And for anyone that this is their first time joining, my name is Dorian Cunion. I'm an executive coach and small business consultant with Your Path Coaching and Consulting. And what I primarily do is I help small business owners, come up with plans and strategies for running their businesses more effectively. Today's topic of discussion is all around decision making, and I know that teaching your employees how to make decisions that align with your vision and your mission is up much important. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity to kind of talk about that today. So you asked me about 7-Eleven, which I spent 21 years with 7-Eleven. There was this one situation when I was the zone leader, where my team actually came to me wanting to roll out a program that I wasn't 100% on board with. So I figured we could talk about that today.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited. And thank you for mentioning that and introducing yourself. My name is Madeline McMahon. I am a fractional marketing strategist, and I like to work with small business teams or entrepreneurs in startup phase to create a marketing strategy around what you're currently trying to accomplish and a budget that works for your business at this moment. So let's jump in. Tell me about this example of a time that your team came to you with something and you had hesitations. How did that work in the decision making process?
Have you ever heard of games of skill?
I don't think so. Games of skill?
Yeah, so I would say it was probably back in like 2018 or 2019. My team came to me and they were like, "Boss, we got some franchisees that want to put games of skill into stores." And they showed me a picture. I was like, "That looks like a slot machine." And they were like, "No, no, no, it's not a slot machine. It's kind of similar to a slot machine. It's important that you don't call it a slot machine because you can't have slot machines in convenience stores in Virginia. It is a game of skill." So what separates a game of skill from a slot machine is that slot machines are random, it's purely
Mm,
luck. But with a game of skill, it's very similar to playing a game on your phone. So if you're really good
mm.
at the game, then you can win a lot of money. If you're not so good, then you're not going to win anything.
Can I ask what your initial hesitation was? Were you worried about loitering or
Yeah.
what was the initial hesitation there?
The hesitation, and I think, nobody has any questions about 7-Eleven and what it is. 7-Elevens, um, from time to time, we attract the wrong element or like people to stores that loiter or like cause
Mm,
problems. So I was really concerned about, is this going to make the stores less safe? And I really
mm.
wasn't concerned about, the money side of it. It was purely like, can we put these in the stores and ensure that the employees are safe, the customers are safe, and that it's going to be consistent with our brand image?
Interesting. So did you approach this decision in a way that you would typically approach any decision, or was this process unique in this example?
Yeah, so while I was at 7-Eleven, one of the things that they would frequently do is send us to these leadership workshops. And one of them was at West Point. So West Point has this whole academy that's called the Thayer. And at Thayer, we had learned about this principle called leaders intent. And, prior
Mm,
to my team coming to me of asking about this program, we had rolled out this concept of leaders intent, which really is pretty simple. Whenever there's a project that you want to do, you sit there and outline, like, what is the purpose of the project? What's the desired end state? What are some of the guiding principles, and what are some of the key requirements? So I had already worked with
mm,
my team on, whenever they have an idea, they have to present it to me in this way. And then that allows me to, kind of digest what they want to do and give them the green light on how they can proceed.
mm. That is very interesting. Did you find at 7-Eleven that having that process became an obstacle for the staff to give you an idea, or did you find that you got more intentional, more developed ideas by the time they were presented to you?
I got better ideas. So what frequently
Mm,
happens, especially like within large organizations, is everybody has an idea, but we can't pursue everybody's idea. So,
mm,
as an executive, as a leader, I needed to know that people had really thought through, like, what could go wrong, what's
mm,
the upside potential of this idea. And one of these terms that we always would use is the juice worth the squeeze? So, you think about, like, if you're making some orange juice in the morning, there's a certain amount of pressure you have to do in order to get some juice out of there. If you have an orange that's, like, pretty dry, it's like, it's not worth the squeeze. We're not gonna squeeze that. But
mm.
if you have an orange that's, like, really juicy and it's worth the effort, and you're gonna have some great orange juice at the end, then it's worth the squeeze, and let's go forward and do it.
I have to imagine you had a variety of personality types on your staff as well. So, how did you inform them, or what kind of guidelines were they given in how to appropriately present an idea to you? Is there a formula or a worksheet or
Yeah.
something?
So, everything goes back to the principles that we had within the company. When I'm working with small business owners, I always talk about values first. It's like, what are your values? What are your non-negotiables? Let's get them on paper. Let's communicate them to your team.
Mhm.
Within 7-Eleven, we had, like, some very clear principles, and, like, one of them was customer obsession. So whenever the team would present an idea to me, it would be like, how is this demonstrating customer obsession? How are we taking care of the customer
Mm.
with this? And within
Mm.
this specific situation, my team argued that this was customer obsessed because we are neighborhood locations, we're safe locations. There's people that want to play these games, but they might not be able to access them, or they might have to go to bars
Mm.
or places that they don't want to go. If we put this actually in our locations, we were taking care of our customers by providing them something that they wanted in a safe way.
Interesting. And did you find that the process for this is something that is like done in one sitting, or is this process for decision making a multi-step component? I mean, were there multiple layers of approval, or was it just one pitch and then you said yes
Yeah.
or no?
So the way that this whole thing went down, they probably presented this idea to me like 3 or 4 times before I approved them.
Wow.
And it was super interesting because the first time was just in a casual conversation. They were trying to feel me
Okay.
out, because sometimes, if I'm on board with something, I don't need a whole lot of details. It's like, hey, we want to bring in, let's say, like, Ravens merchandise, and it's like, well, I'm a Ravens fan. I believe our customers are Ravens fans. Go ahead. Other things, if I'm lukewarm to them, then I'd say, hey, I need more details. You got to give me some things so I can feel comfortable with the risk of this, with the benefits of this,
Mm.
and then I would give my authorization to go forward. So where I finally approved this, um, we would have these quarterly face-to-face meetings where the entire team was together, and we were actually out at dinner. And that's where they gave their pitch of, this is why we should do this. This is the upside potential. This is what we're going to do to make sure that the employees are safe and that customers are safe. And ultimately, I approved them. They wanted to do all the zone at one time. I said, no, we're not going to do all. I was like, you can pick 10 stores. You guys, it's up to you guys to pick the 10 stores, test it out for 60 days. And if those 10 stores do well, I'll let you double it, and then we'll do it for another 60. And if that does well, then we'll double it again. And then at that point, if we've kind of grown to that part and we haven't run into any issues, then we can talk about how do we really expand this throughout the entire zone.
That is fascinating. So I like that you gave them kind of those parameters and kind of got those guidelines. Was there also then a process for quantifying that effort? Did you set goals, or was it let's see what happens and if we could scale it? What did that look like as far as quantifying that idea that they had?
So that goes back to the leader's intent. So the purpose, they presented the purpose. We're in business to make money. The purpose was to make money. So then, what's the desired end state? And this is where we started getting into math, because there were some stores that we could put this into the store and it didn't impact anything. We weren't taking out
Mm,
any sections. There was no harm. So the hurdle for saying yes was a lot lower.
mm,
Other stores, in order to do this, we actually had to remove sections of the store. So in those situations, it was like, okay, we're going to lose $800 of sales this month. We're going to lose $800 of sales. We have to cover that $800, sales. Plus,
interesting.
we have to
Yeah.
have that incremental dollars that we're projecting. So by us being clear about what success was in the beginning, then we could
Mm.
evaluate, at the end of the trial period of, was this successful? Do we want to continue it? Or was it not successful? We're going to go ahead and get rid of it and go back to the way things were.
Very interesting. Along our journey and talking about things together, we've talked a lot about, understanding what you want to accomplish and understanding your goals, but also igniting that fire in your team and getting other people to kind of buy in a way that they feel excited to share and energetic to share. So it's fun to kind of feel like we're closing the circle in that you've built the fire, you've empowered them to have decision making. What about when it's not that streamlined? Is there process for even vetting any of the decisions and conversations that you're going to have? Is there like an entry point to know that it's time to put a presentation together? Or what have you found with maybe some of the newer representatives in the organization that have ideas that haven't had the time to build the fire and the trust yet?
Yeah. I think that you raise a really good question, especially like if you're trying to introduce this new concept within your organization. It's like, how do we actually give people the skills that they need in
Mm,
order to present their ideas in a way that can be accepted?
yeah.
So one of the leadership principles within 7-Eleven was act like an entrepreneur, which I pretended to understand while I was working for 7-Eleven, did not fully understand until I became an entrepreneur. But, entrepreneurs, they don't have a whole lot of resources. They're trying to
Mm,
make magic happen and they can't afford to have like this big mistakes. So as an entrepreneur, you always have to be asking yourself, like, how am I making the most of my time? How am I making the
mm,
most of my money? So I would say if you're trying to roll this process out within your organization, one thing is to be clear about what your values are and make sure you communicate your values. But the second part is helping people understand the business side of it.
mm,
The reason that you get a no within an organization is because the leader doesn't believe that the time and the money required to do what you're suggesting is going to generate the return that they want. So the
mm.
more you can help your team understand, hey, if I give you $1, I want $5 back. And if you're spending 10 hours on this, then we need to be generating, $500. Then it becomes a lot clearer for them to make decisions
Yeah.
on, hey, I do believe that this is a good opportunity because I am confident that we can make this much money or we're going to get this type of return or cost savings.
Okay, so what I'm imagining now is this is also potentially a tool that makes it easier to say an informed no. So if your
Yeah.
team brings an idea that is not something that's going to work, it's not just that you don't like their idea, it's that it hasn't met the criteria, for example. Is that what I'm kind
It
of hearing
is,
from
and
you?
so we are both located pretty close to King's Dominion. And when you
Mhm.
think about it, like when you were probably 7 years old, if you went to amusement park, there were certain rides you could get onto and certain rides you couldn't. And the ones you couldn't is because you weren't tall enough. So
Mm,
the same goes with ideas. It's like your idea is not tall enough. It's not chinning that bar. Like if you continue to develop it, if you build it, then it might be big enough that we can allow it to get on the ride and go. But there
okay.
has to be no sometimes. We can't do everything.
Mm,
But the clearer that you can let your team understand, you're going to get a no if you aren't hitting these requirements, then you're going to see better ideas, number one. And then number
Mm.
two, when you actually get ideas, they're flushed out in a way that you're not having to do a whole lot of the legwork.
I love that. So then is there just like one worksheet that I can fill out that gives you all that information? Is there like a checklist I should download for staff that I'm working with? What does the framework of that decision making process look like if it's tangible?
So, from a practicing standpoint, because one thing that I always encourage small business owners to do is let's practice small and then let's grow into something big. What I'm going to do is share my website. So, let me hit share. All right. So on the business consulting page of my website, there's a little bit of information about, how I help small business owners and what are some of the things that I provide. But one of the most valuable things for somebody, whether they're working with me or not, is I've collected a couple different resources that I've used from other websites and put it on this page just as a Kickstarter for a small business owner trying to make a decision on, you know, should I hire a coach? And the answer is if you can use this tool and accomplish your mission without having to talk to anybody else, then go forward, just execute it, go as far as you can. If you download one of these tools, you're working on stuff, and then you're running into a little bit of a wall, then that's the appropriate time to bring in a coach to
Mm,
help you either understand the concept or help you with applying it. So, for conversational purposes, operating efficiencies, I'll go ahead and click on that one. So, this is a job aid that Verizon Small Business provides, and just a plug for Verizon. Uh, they make a lot of money off of small businesses. So it makes sense for them to reinvest in trying to help small businesses be more efficient. If you're making
mm,
money, you can spend more with them. You're getting extra phone service, you're getting elevated broadband. So they're sharing these resources because they want small businesses to be successful. There's
mm,
some videos that go along with this, but this specific tool is just a worksheet that's all around operating efficiency. So as you're kind of thinking about your business, one of the first questions they're asking you is, what's the purpose of your business? Okay.
mm,
Uh, then question around what processes need improvement. This is something that you could sit down with your team and say, let's think about how we're doing work. What are some processes that we could improve?
mm,
This stimulates them. It's driving some engagement. And then asking, so if we improve this, what advantage would it make for our business? Right here, three questions. You've got a great team meeting that's going to surface some ideas. It's going to help you to communicate to your employees why things are a certain way. And that if
mm,
they want things to change, what you would need to see in order to change them. But without going any farther, I mean, we set the stage for really trying to identify, how can we make this business better?
mm. So how often does the process for decision making change for a business owner? Is this something that I decide what works for my business now and I never have to think about it again? Or how often do I need to reconsider the process I use to make a decision for my business or for my team?
So, what I would say is your basic decision making process probably won't change a whole lot.
Okay.
What will change is who's involved. So the example that I'll
Okay.
give is if you're a solopreneur, like all the decisions they rest with you. So you're making all of them. As you start to add team members, you're going to want to push down some of that decision making to your employees.
Hmm.
In order for you to feel comfortable with doing that, you have to kind of teach them your framework for making decisions, let them know what things you're comfortable with them doing without talking to you, what things they need to come to you with. And, that's how decision making evolves. If you're fortunate enough to grow to having multiple layers, then it's not just you teaching your direct reports, but now you have to think about indirect reports. I have an employee that
Mm,
is not, I'm not their primary point of contact. They have to go to their boss, and then their boss is going to empower them to do some things, or their boss is going to have to come to me. but how do we make sure that that employee that may be 2 or 3 layers away from me still understands
Mm.
my intent? They understand what's important to me so that they're not wasting time thinking of ideas that aren't going to get approved. They're really dialed in and focused on what are those things that align with my vision, align with my mission, align with my values, so that they're more likely to get a yes.
So, how important is it then for your managers to adopt your exact decision making process? You know, if knowing that this is going to have that ripple effect and that the managers will be implementing a decision making promise or decision making process in the moment, do you find that it is necessary for the process to be uniform from top to bottom, or is there room for adaptation kind of based on what the process is?
I'm a big believer in having a consistency of process. And the reason for that is if you have a process, then you can tweak it, you can adjust it, you can make it better. So if from a decision making process, one of the steps is, using this leader's intent, where like, I need you to give me why we're doing this. I need you to tell us how the company or the customer is going to be better. I need you to provide me like the guiding principles. What are like, things that you've considered as we're going to execute this, and then requirements, things like budget and timeline. If that is like kind of the universal thing, then we're providing a framework that regardless of your idea, regardless of your skill set, we have common language that can bring comfort to everybody. If someone is using a completely different process, it could be a great process, but it's inefficient because as a
Mm,
leader, I'm accustomed to making decisions with a certain methodology. And maybe I'm open to evolving that methodology, but whatever that methodology is, if everybody else follows it, they're going to have an easier time influencing me. If they want to do something different, then it might be successful, but it's likely going to take longer.
that makes sense. And does this kind of work on the opposite end of that too? I mean, or I guess, do you find that the process is the same for people as it is for systems? You know, if what if my decision making is related to someone's continued employment with me, for example? Do you find that you need a different process for decision making if it's specific to people on the team?
So, one of the things that I work with business owners on is accountability planning. So nobody wants to like plan for, oh, I'm going to have to terminate somebody. But the reality is, if you're in business long enough, you're going to have to terminate somebody. So the better you have a plan around that, the easier it's going to go. I teach a 3 by 3 method, and the 3 by 3 method is really simple. If there's an accountability issue, and I'm not talking about things that are like super serious, like if you stole $10,000, like we're not going to have progression, like you're just gone.
Mm, yeah.
But if
Okay.
you have something like an employee that's showing up to work late all the time, okay, we're going to have a conversation a maximum of 3 times, and this is going to be me reminding you, asking you what do you need to do in order to get to work on time, trying to help you. But after we talked about this 3 times, it's going to be in writing. We're going to
Mm,
have the conversation. I'm going to follow it up with an email or like a written documentation of some sort, just so you can know that we're moving beyond this is a small issue to this is an issue that could impact your employment here. Once you get to that written, what I advise people is set a maximum, and I say 3
mm,
because 3 by 3 is easy. So the most that you're going to have written documentation with somebody is 3 times. Once you've had that conversation and you've written it down 3 times, now we're talking about there's been 6 conversations about an issue. By the time you have a conversation 6 times, you're
mm.
probably done having the conversation. The employee's probably done being on the other side of the conversation. So you can be really comfortable sitting down and saying, look, this can't continue. I either need you to change immediately or we're going to have to let you go. And what
Mm.
I've found over the course of my career is that it's extremely rare that you get to that formal documentation of like, I need you to change or I'm going to fire you. Most people will
Mm.
self-elect out and say, this person's serious, they're not going away, they're clear about their expectations, and they're going to hold me accountable, and they'll just self-elect out. On the rare occurrence that somebody is just adamant that they're just not going to leave without being shown the door, then as a leader, you feel comfortable because you know that you've had 6 conversations. You've given them plenty of
Mm,
opportunity. So by the time you start doing the last formal documentation, you can go ahead and feel comfortable. But I challenge people, like, you can't bluff. It's like 3 times. Like, if you're going to say, if you don't fix this, I'm going to fire you. Like, don't say that more than three
mhm.
times. If you say it more than three
Yeah.
times, then people start to think, oh, this person's not serious. I can do what I want. And the bigger problem is that it just doesn't impact that employee. Everyone else is watching you. And if you're not holding
Mhm.
accountability across the board, then you're actually diminishing your power and influence within your organization.
I'm glad you brought that up. Something that has surprised me in my life career and working in different industries and things like that is the disconnect between the disciplinary action and recording it. And
Mm.
I've been in an office situation where there have been multiple offenses that were acknowledged but not documented as intentionally. So then it became harder and harder to enforce the disciplinary actions because there wasn't that paper trail. And so as much as we don't want to think about that negative, I can really see the value of having that process for decision making across every aspect of your business, and then your own accountability and reinforcing that.
It's super helpful, and one of the benefits that I have is that in my last role with 7-Eleven, I was responsible for 1,000 stores on the East Coast. So you think about 1,000 stores, average store had 10 employees, so it was 10,000 people that were, like, under my purview.
Mm,
In situations like that, like, I just had visibility to so many mistakes. When people are doing a great job, that
mm,
doesn't land on my desk. That's not the what landed on my desk was the employee that was terminated wrongfully, that there wasn't proper documentation, and where
mm,
the company was either sued or had to pay a fine or some other type of issue. So what that reinforced to me is the importance of documentation.
mm,
If you properly document things, a lot of times, imagine like we were having a conversation and I said, Madeline, we talked about this on February 1st. We talked about it on February 15th. We talked about it on March 1st. And now we're talking about it today.
mm,
That's powerful. It's like, you actually know when we talked about this and you have details of it. And,
mm,
I'm actually a little bit embarrassed. So I don't even want to go to like get a lawyer and say that I'm being wrongfully terminated because I know I wasn't doing the right thing.
mm.
As a hiring manager, as a boss, you want to make sure that you're collecting the facts and also presenting the facts. And that just solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, and I can also then, that's interesting you bring up, focusing on the facts. Now I'm imagining that having a process for decision making also means having a process for quantifying what is factual, what facts need to be considered in that. So that's really valuable. Now, I heard you say 1,000 stores.
Yeah.
That sounds like a human that never gets to go on vacation or take time off. So
Yeah.
like what positive impact does the power of decision making have in for you to be able to remove yourself from needing to be a part of every single conversation because you've empowered your leaders to know what the process is?
You know, decision making and accountability go hand in hand. If if I've empowered somebody, and the way I would always characterize it is like this is your box. And as long as you stay within this box, you're protected. There's no harm that will come to you.
Mm,
Now, if you get outside of this box, you're taking responsibility, both good and bad, for what happens. And
interesting.
I've had employees before that have gone outside the box. They went rogue and they did something. And I'm like, you're lucky because
Mm,
that was a good decision and it worked out well. But
mm,
I've also had individuals go outside the box, did things without having authorization that didn't align with the way that I wanted things done. And then the accountability fell on them because
mm,
you didn't follow the guidelines, the instructions that I gave. So um, I think as a leader, it's important that you give people space. You got to define like this is the area, this is your sandbox, and you can do anything inside this sandbox. If people go outside of that sandbox, you have to hold them accountable if things go wrong. And then if they go outside and things work out well, then you have to evaluate, have I given them a big enough sandbox? Because it may be that you're not empowering them as much as you could, and that you're actually holding back them, your organization, and yourself because you're not delegating or empowering them to do as much as they should be empowered to do.
Mm. Well, and again, I can see why that awareness would matter, and even understanding how big the sandbox should be or needs to be, you know? So it sounds like you need to know your business pretty well to have this set up and to be set up for success. At what point in business ownership and entrepreneurship should I actually pen to paper write down what my decision making process is? What stage of business ownership is like the moment that you need to make sure you've got your processes figured out by now?
It's a great question. So I'm actually listening to a book right now on project management. And I think that we can look to some principles of project management to kind of guide that decision making. Within project management, what it talks about is like if you have something that's a reoccurring task that's very predictable, then you should have some standard operating procedures and some guidelines. If you
Okay.
have something that's completely uncertain, then you shouldn't have like such rigidity. You should take more of an agile process where it's like directionally, this is what we want to do, but there's a lot of latitude. So I would say early on in your business, there are some things that you know 100%. Like, I want things done this way.
Mm,
Those things should be written down. They should be communicated. They should be made clear. The things you're uncertain about, you don't want to write those down. You want to experiment, you want to test, you want to learn. But then as you learn, as you know, like, every Wednesday we need to have a carousel post. Well, then that becomes a standard operating procedure where every Wednesday we have a carousel post because I know this works. And I know this works because of data, because of experience.
mm. I was kind of imagining a standard operating procedure in this.
Yeah.
I was wondering, at what point do we label our process for decision making as the SOP?
Yeah.
Is it once it's fine tuned and then it's a part of our handbooks, or is it a plaque we put up in the wall in
Yeah.
the community room, or,
Yeah.
or kind of what's the best way to publish your decision making process once you've narrowed it down and you're confident in that process?
I've seen it done a lot of different ways. One thing that 7-Eleven did, which I thought was super smart, we had these little like plastic cards, and like one of them was a "it can be done" card, and with that, it had
Mm,
4 questions, and these were the 4 questions that you're supposed to ask yourself, and if you could answer yes to all of them, then you were empowered to take the action. And having that clarity, having that being something that if somebody said, "Why are you doing that?" you can pull it out and be like, "I did it because of this." I think it empowers people to take action. So whether it is a card, a coin, a plaque that's up
mm.
at the office, how you do it, I think that's up to you and like the organizational culture that you want to define. But being super clear on this is how decisions are made here. This is how, if you're going to take an action, you can do so safely. I think it's just absolutely vital.
So I asked earlier how often you kind of revisit that, and you mentioned that once we have an idea of what it looks like, it's not likely it will change very often. But what if, I guess, what are some signs that our process is not as good as it could or should be based on feedback from employees? Like, what is kind of a sign that it's time for you to maybe update some of your processes because of experiences?
So I really appreciate that question because it causes me to clarify a little bit more. So when it comes to the decision making process, I don't think that that changes very much because the way that people make decisions is like pretty universal.
Mm,
First you wonder about something, then you come up with some ideas, and then you discern if those ideas are good, and then you kind of start to execute. So like that process is going to be universal. Now, what will change and evolve, your values as an organization may change and
mm,
evolve as you grow because, as a solopreneur, as one person, your values are just your values. Every time you add a new person to your organization, they either have to 100% accept your values, or you have to kind of shift your values a little bit so that everybody can feel comfortable. So what I've just observed, and when I was with 7-Eleven, we would acquire companies all the time. As much as we would have an impact on those employees, they would have an impact on us. So recognizing the fact that as you grow, group dynamics changes, your capabilities change, your organizational values change, and it's important to pause and say, okay, we're a little bit different today than we were yesterday. Uh,
Mm,
are there any processes that we need to evolve? Are there any principles that we need to evolve? And most importantly, if you think back to when you start, small team, high level of interaction, as you get bigger, that leader, they're not spending 50% of their time with every new employee.
mm,
So then it becomes even more important of, okay, if they're not having direct impact with me, if they're not picking up all the tribal knowledge that I gave the first and second employee, how can we systematically make
mm.
sure that these new employees understand our origin story, understand what's important, understand the way we go to business so that they can be bought in and they can execute to your expectations?
Yeah, I love that. Keeping that momentum alive and making sure that that ripple effect does continue to trickle down to the new staff as you grow and scale. Because I'm that's a great point. You're not always going to be the person that's there on the scene. You're
Yep.
growing your business. You're growing your people. And so I think that what's also great about this is imagining scaling for growth in the humans as well. Like knowing that processes and systems are going to evolve over time because the people implementing them are maybe going to change throughout your business. And so personality types may come into play, or I find myself wondering how much technology would influence things like this, but I guess it's not necessarily the fundamentals, maybe just how you communicate them, or what the presentation looks like. I don't know
Yeah.
that technology is going to change much of our process for decision making, but it's hard not to think of AI in today's world.
Yeah.
Do you imagine drastic changes in that as we start to or implement more artificial intelligence in our systems?
I think as a business leader, you have to like understand organizational culture and then processes.
Okay.
So AI in itself may not be impacting your organizational culture, but it can impact your processes. So for example, um, the culture may say that in order for us to do a project, we need to have a return on investment of 3x. We spend $1, we get
Hmm.
all right. Uh, from a AI standpoint, are we now teaching the employees use AI to build your projections? Use
Mm,
AI to do your research.
yeah.
Are we loading in that leader's intent document and we're asking AI to do the first draft of what is the purpose, what is the desired end state, what are the guiding principles, what are the key requirements? Because what AI can really do well is uh, redo tasks that have already been done. So if you have something that you know that you want or you need, figuring out how do you use your current data, how do you use lessons learned and experience to kind of automate and transfer knowledge and things of that nature.
I love that. That's a great tip in there. Okay, cool. So we've talked through the importance of having kind of an SOP of decision making process, knowing what step one through step five could and should look like in a way that other people in your organization can implement that, so it's clear why a choice is yes or no. We'd love to know what happened with 7-Eleven with the
Okay, yeah.
games of skills. Yeah. So did you end up with all these games? What happened? How'd it go?
So what I can tell you is that it could be argued
Mhm.
that us launching Game of Skill helped our company achieve its earnings budget the following year. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing to think about because the zone that I had was one of the smaller zones. And a year after we rolled out Games of Skill, we were the number one zone in fresh food growth. We were the number one zone in total sales growth. We were the number one zone in like store cleanliness. And we generated an incremental $12 million just from the games of skill, not all the other benefits that we had, but just from the games of skill. So then you ask, Dorian, what's the correlation between that? How would putting a machine in your store drive all this like other behavior?
Mhm.
Well, I think there was a couple of things. One was this trust and cultural benefit that was generated. What the team learned was if they had an idea, they presented it correctly, that Dorian would give the okay from it. If it was successful, then we would throw the entire organization's energy around amplifying it, and that we'd have some success. We had other programs around like toys and novelty items that followed the same framework, and we saw it grow. The other thing that we saw was that the stores actually were not less safe because of having the games of skill. We actually saw a reduction in robberies and shoplifting. And you go,
Wow.
why? Why? That doesn't even make any sense. Well, my hypothesis was we would have 24-year-olds in the stores playing these machines. That's not who played the machines.
Mm.
Who played the machines were, 55-year-old women, 60-year-old
Mm.
men. And there's something about an old person sitting in the store that just stopped a lot of the nonsense that we would have in stores
Huh.
sometimes. So that was one hidden benefit that we didn't anticipate. Um, the biggest thing though was, the typical franchisee was making anywhere between $500 to $2,000 more a month that had these. When you're putting money into somebody's pocket, it's a whole lot easier to work with them. So
Mm.
when we would go into the stores and say, we need you to try this new item, they would say, I don't know if it will work. Well, that worked. Like, trust us. And it was like, okay.
Yeah.
When we would go into the store and say, your store's not clean enough, we need you to do a better job cleaning. The previous argument was, I don't have enough money. I can't afford the extra labor, all those things. It's like, oh, you can't tell us that. We know how much money we helped you earn by putting in this system. You have the
Mm.
money. If you do it, then we're going to be able to have even more. So there's so much positive momentum that can come from just one idea. But when I look
Mm.
back as a leader, if I trusted my own judgment, I would have said no, we wouldn't have done it, and we would not had any of that success. But because I had a process in place for making decisions, for doing tests, and then for like amplifying things that went well, um, I had more success. My team had more success. Franchisees had more success. There was just so much benefit from just having a process in place.
That's amazing. Was part of that process rewarding the good idea? Were the team members that brought this to you and were successful, were they acknowledged for having been a part of that process or for having met the
Yeah,
criteria and getting to the next threshold?
it's been a while, so I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember that the field consultant that ran the pilot ended up being field consultant of the year, and he got a cash prize for that.
It's
The
awesome.
market manager that ran point on the project also ran one market manager of the year and got some additional monies because of that. And then I did a number of spot bonuses, and this is just a separate
Mm.
thing that as a business owner, you're going to have your salary and wages. You're going to
Mhm.
have planned bonuses, which is like, if we hit this number, you have this bonus. But you should have a little kitty of money that if somebody does something that like surprises you, that's just like,
Mm.
hey, that you have it built in your budget that you can say, hey, here's $200, here's a gift certificate for a dinner, anything
Yeah.
that you can show some appreciation. Um, I if I remember back, it was probably like 10 or 15 field consultants that I gave a little spot bonus like that too. And what it did for our culture, oh my goodness. Like I still have field consultants to this day that say they remember getting like that handwritten note and that little bonus as a
That's
thing.
awesome.
And it just creates a lot of positive momentum.
That's amazing, man. This has been a great conversation. We've breezed through our topic today. A lot of really great key takeaways from my desk. I think that it seems really obvious to me to have a process for making a decision, but thinking about how many different parts of my business that could apply to, not just executive decision, not just management decision. There are a lot of different ways that it makes sense to have a process and now even more sense to document that because it could be a component of discipline or reward. So making sure that you have that structure and that your team understands it. And I love that transitioning us into next week. All right, so we've got the team, we've got our mission, we've got our values, we've ignited the fire, we have our process for decision making. How do we now empower our team and delegate effectively to multiply the impact and that momentum? What about you, Dorian? What key takeaways are you gonna walk away with, or something that you'd like for business owners to hear that maybe we haven't mentioned yet today?
Well, it's a couple times I mentioned leaders intent. And what I'll just say, I don't have the leaders intent document on my website. That's I won't even call it a proprietary tool, but it's just part of my systematic coaching approach that I just don't share broadly. But if somebody listened to this and they'd like a copy of that document, reach out to me either on LinkedIn or email me, dcunyon at yourpathexecutivesolutions.com, and I'll share that with you. If you have some additional questions around how to actually execute it, then we can talk through it, because the leader's intent is just one part of this process. I also work with small business owners on an after action review, which is
Mm,
important because when you complete a task, you got to learn from that experience and let it influence future experiences. I can talk about this stuff all day long. So if you'd like to
mhm.
have a follow up discussion around those things, please reach out to me. Also share that my blog topic for this week on my website is all around delegation. I share a story around a franchisee that I worked with that was trying to grow to multiple locations, but was having a hard time being able to grow, and just how delegating allowed him to go from one store to three stores within like 3 years.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And I know that a lot of the people that I'm working with right now are looking to scale and take it to that next step. So that sounds like a great next topic for us to chat about. I don't see any questions in the chat today, and we touched a little bit on things that we talked about previously. I don't know. Any final thoughts, Dorian? Any action items that you want people to walk away with and try today?
The like closing thought that I'll give you is we have a success equation that we like share with all business owners, and it's, culture times process equals results. So if you're not
Mm,
getting the business results that you want, take a look at, what are the processes you have in place. Take a look at your organizational culture. If you can make a change that impacts both of them, you're going to be able to achieve the results that you're looking to have.
mm. Wow. Say that again. Culture. What is it? Say that one more time for
Culture
us.
times process equals results.
And then just to kind of round that out, if I'm someone that is a smaller team, or I don't have a board of people to help validate my thoughts and stuff like that, at what point in this process and or needing validation or support is it time to start looking to a business coach? At what point in this journey do you think people can say to themselves, all right, it's time for me to phone a friend? Is it just when you're in the overwhelm? Or is it, what would be a good tipping point for someone to actually book a consultation call with you?
I would say at any point, the way that I've designed my system is that, it's almost call on demand. My rate system is by session. So if you just had one problem, you were like, I need somebody to bounce this idea off of, then we can sit there and talk through it. I can share some of the different tips and guidelines and best practices that I have. If you're looking for something a little bit more than that, something as small as two sessions where we have one that's a planning one and then a second one scheduled as an accountability conversation. you know the moment that you pay for help, you're more focused because nobody wants to waste money. So if you hire a consultant and you say, I'm serious enough that I'm going to pay an expert to help me, your
Mm,
accountability ratchets it up, and it's just a
mm.
whole lot easier for you to get things done.
That makes a lot of sense. And you absolutely made that feel much more approachable in thinking about a one on one, or, that knowing that it can be something that's small. I don't have to sign up to work with you for a year to see the value of having the input and your expertise and things. So I'm really glad that you put that into perspective for us, that we can look to an expert even on a smaller scale as we're fleshing out ideas, or building some of those systems. So that's good to know, that there are multiple ways that people could use you as a resource.
I think that's the
Um,
awesome thing about the services that you provide, because if somebody just wants a one-time session from a strategy standpoint, they can hire you for that. And a lot of times that gives you, as the business owner, enough confidence to say, okay, I can see value from this individual. I believe that they can help me take my business to the next level. I'm going to execute some of these things that they told me so I can make some money. And then in 2 months, I'm going to call them back and I'm going to have a recurring schedule with them. And I know that's how a lot of people start off with you, with just a discovery call. They go
Mhm.
execute some things, make some money, and then they come back saying, okay, I know there's water in this well, so let me go ahead and try to get some more water.
Yeah, that's a really great reference actually, and even funnier still because I think that sounds much more approachable than drinking from a fire hose, right? We
Yeah.
want to be able to we want
Yeah.
to find the right person for where we are based on what we're actually hoping to accomplish, and so it's good to remember that there are lots of options and lots of different types of people that can kind of meet you where you are based on what you need in the process. But it's important to have those processes. It's important to understand why you make the decisions that you make them. And it's important to bring other people into that story. So I really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. This has been a really fun conversation. Again, my name is Madeline McMahon. I'm a fractional marketing strategist. And joining me today is Dorian. And Dorian, you want to share this QR code is going to take everybody to your website, I believe, so that they can
Yeah.
take a look at some
So
of those resources.
if you use this QR code, what it's going to do is it's going to give you access to sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter is going to provide you with weekly advice and guidance. There's also some links to my website for some different free resources. Uh, Whether you want to hire me or Madeline as a coach or a consultant, or just want to try to harvest some best practices, scan the QR code, check it out. You're going to see some things that are going to be able to help your business.
Yeah, lots of good resources there. It's always good to know that there's information out there and make it easy for people to find it. So thank you for pooling those resources on your website and being such a great resource to the community and everything.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody for joining, and for those that have watched this later on, and please reach out to us on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions.
Yes, and then join us next week. Tuesday, we go live at noon, and the recordings will always be available later. But we're going to dive into delegating effectively and multiplying that impact that you've made now that you've got your systems and your processes in place. So, looking forward to that one. All right. Thanks, everyone.